I want to be able to speak to you about things in Hong Kong right now because I know it's been a very difficult time. I've followed news reports for the last month and a half regarding the situation in Hong Kong. Part of what I think it's important to keep in mind at this time is, again, the question of identity. For those of you in Hong Kong, who are from Hong Kong, who have Chinese blood, it's not an issue of whether Hong Kong has its own identity or whether China's different identity is different. As Chinese people, you share a common identity that God has given you. And that identity, the part that's common, there is a unique part of that identity for each of you, how you live it out. But there is a common identity that you as Chinese-blooded people share. That's what you want to grab hold of at this time. Because a lot of the unrest in Hong Kong, I think, is a reflection of a deep misunderstanding or disconnect with who Chinese people really are. And so I think at this point of time, what you want to ask the Lord about, because last year I began to prophesy that the Chinese people carried that identity of being able to bless things so that people, land, lives become more fruitful and multiply and become full. And that's what you want to focus on. It really doesn't matter whether you're governed by Britain or governed by the Chinese government for that to happen. Because if you submit yourself to God, He governs you. And God is not bound by what the Chinese government does or by what some other government might do. This seems to me to be a political situation brewing in Hong Kong. And God does not involve Himself in the politics of the world system because His kingdom system is far different than the world system. Jesus says, give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, give to God what belongs to God. Tax money, as Jesus said, belongs to Caesar. It had His picture on the coin. But when it comes to you and your identity, you belong to God. You don't belong to the Chinese government. Your God is the one who you belong to. He's bought you, paid for you with a price, the blood of Jesus, and you belong to Him. So this is where your identity has to take shape. That identity of being able to bless comes from the fact that you belong to God. You don't belong to Hong Kong. You don't belong to the Chinese government. As a Chinese-blooded person, you belong to your God because your God has bought you. And so this is a time to really see that no matter what happens politically, no matter how unstable things may appear and actually be in society, your life can still be stable. Your life can still go on to enter into and accomplish all that God has created you for. But to do that, you're going to have to submit yourself to God, not to these systems. These are two different systems. For those of you who are praying for God to change the political system, I think you ought to refocus the way that you're praying. And for those of you who are praying that God stop the protesters, I think you need to refocus your praying. Your praying is not about how that world system operates. Your prayer is about how you're going to operate under God's kingdom. Because that's who you are, and that kingdom exists. The world system will try to tell you that it's the only system that exists. But it is a false system, and it exists in opposition to God's kingdom. God's kingdom is more powerful. God's kingdom is more real. And God's kingdom is the only one that has the way, the truth, and the life. So this is a time for you in Hong Kong to reconfirm, reestablish, re-embrace your identity as Chinese people who belong to the King of Kings. Jesus is your king, not Xi Jinping, not the Queen of England. You belong to the Lord your God. Now is the time to embrace that experience it, and demonstrate it.